Hello, everybody, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, Jordan, your host, master of lore, and storyteller extraordinaire. Now, for today's video, we're going to be starting things off by me sharing a little bit of a story with you. It's from about 7, 8 years ago, gaming with some good friends of mine, and it's relevant to the point at hand here that I want to make. This little bit of tip and advice that I'm giving you. Now, this was starting off in 3.5 D&D, and it's a setting and world I'd kind of been tinkering around with for a while. And essentially, it's a mage city in the middle of this massive wasteland. It's not a naturally occurring wasteland. The landscape's recovering after this massive arcane magical disaster. Now, the Mages City manages to exist because, well, it's run by a bunch of mages. And there's a lot of trade using portals and the like. Anyways, parts of this wasteland are starting to recover. There are little oases out in the desert springing up, and new life is growing, plant life. The soil's getting better. It's becoming enriched, and as part of generating a little bit of extra independence from their absolute reliance on trade and perhaps creating new streams of revenue, the mages, the ruling council, the government for the city, has been sending out settlers to work the land and help try to encourage more growth, even trying to recruit the occasional druid when they can manage it. But at one of these little oasis towns, there's been a series of strange murders, and the local guardsmen don't seem to be able to stop it or even have any ideas as to what's going on. Not only that, but there's been bandit and raider activity in the local area. Several caravans have been waylaid and ambushed. So they hire a series of adventurers to go out and see if they can't just drum anything up. Now, these aren't random adventurers. One of them is a recently graduated student um, from the Mages Academy, floating above the city. Another is a scout that works in the city guard, ranging out into the wasteland and putting an end to threats early before they can really start causing problems. And then there's a scattering of one or two others that are accompanying the group. Anyways, they head out to this little oasis town and they begin their investigation. And along the way, just about a day after they get to town, another player's character joined in, a fighter. His family's caravan was annihilated just the night before, and so he stumbled into town and sufficiently motivated with a desire for revenge against the raiders, he agrees to help the other characters because they're there to solve the murder and see what they can do to stop the raiding. Well, as they investigate, they find evidence that there may have been some kind of cult activity within the town, and the murders seem to be particularly targeted towards members of this cult. Well, they investigate, and the group's cleric ends up going missing. Now, this was because the player who was running the cleric just kind of stopped showing up for a while, and so made do by giving them an NPC, the local Church of Pelor, god of the sun, light, healing, and all of that fun jazz. Oh, especially destruction of the undead. Um, they go ahead and assign an acolyte to help them, a junior cleric. And she works her way into the group and heals them, works with them, and she's mostly healing them using a wand and using a little bit of magic here and there. It's not a lot, but it's enough to keep them patched up and keep them going through. And they go through this whole mess. They learn about the locals in the town. They gain support, and they go out and they try to deal with the raider problem because the raiders have kind of been stepping up their level of activity. In fact, the evidence is pointing towards the raiders being the ones committing the murders. Now, why the raiders are specifically targeting suspected members of a cult, um, that's not clear. But they go into it, and they manage to find where the raiders are hiding out at. It's a little cave system, not huge, but a little cave system where they've been holing up at. It's got a natural spring running through it, so fresh water. And they go through the fight, and the mage, well, the wizard, named Oz. I enjoyed that little joke on the player's part. He casts a spell to create a lot of smoke, to hopefully generate some confusion and keep from being shot at while they try to work their way through the cave entrances series of various barricades. And as they clear the smoke, they realize, well, the two guards on hand there had started killing each other. Well, they chalked it up as just panic and just a great deal of confusion, and they ended up just working each other over. And so they killed the survivor. They cleared out the cave and found, oh, hey, most of the bandits aren't actually here. This is perfect. We can just ransack their base of operations and really screw things up for them. Not only that, but we can, once we get out of here, we can report back and bring back a greater force of numbers. Well, they clear out the little mini boss in the area, and the priestess ends up getting kidnapped. And Oz, the wizard, tries helping her, but he ended up using a bit of magic and saw that the figure who kidnapped her had shadow stepped in and shadow stepped back out with her, and saw that it was most of the remaining bandit force. He's like, "Ah, crap, we can't do it. We can't do this. Maybe if we're behind these barricades, we can fight, hold out, and survive against them." So they ended up not picking the fight, and these bandits ride off with the cleric. Also, they find that the raiders are the raiders of the blackened six-fingered hand, and they find a little bit of literature tucked away. They rolled good on their search checks and found that that the raiders are actually part of a cult of Grozd. And for those of you who don't know, in Dungeons and Dragons, Grozd is a demon lord. Actually, one of the three self-proclaimed demon princes of the Abyss. He's a demon lord of lust, vice, corruption, avarice. Generally, just a really unsavory, uncomfortable character, and I love it. It's one of the most sociable and semi-agreeable demons. You still don't want to strike a deal with him, but he's not as likely to immediately just start torturing you for fun. Anyways, so this starts to explain the story here. There's two separate cult factions at war for this oasis town. So the players end up making their way back, and they find that the oasis town, because things have been getting worse and worse, the mayor has been stepping up and up and up the level and severity of the law and the enforcement, basically taking things down a lawful evil direction. So it's a lawful evil force against a chaotic evil force, and it's two separate cults going against each other. Many of you players and storytellers or DMs that have been immersed in Dungeons and Dragons lore for a while probably know what I'm kind of playing in here. It's the blood war between the devils and the demons. And I'm butchering the names here. The Batazu and the Tanari demons, or devils and demons. So it's an inkling of the blood war being played out amongst the devils and demons' mortal servants on this particular plane. So they go in, they go through, they actually end up the players end up managing to wipe out and put an end to the devil worshipping cult. They were cultists of Mammon, who was a devil lord of greed. And then they go through and they find, oh crap, there's a barrier of magic over the Church of Pelor. Well, the wizard identifies it and realizes that's not divine magic. That's all kinds of arcane magic right there. But the barrier drops. They find that undead have actually been streaming out of the cathedral, which struck them as incredibly unusual. It's a cathedral of Pelor, light, healing, and, like I said before, destruction of the undead. So they make their way through, fighting through the ghouls and various skeletons. And when they go inside, they see that some of the acolytes, well, those who weren't murdered, but a number of the acolytes still alive, have horribly disfigured themselves. They're stripped down to their waist and horribly disfigured and scarred and bloodied, and they just start babbling incoherent madness, and they fight their way through them down into the catacombs. And when they get down to the bottom, what the players initially see is the high priest here, the one that had originally assigned the acolyte to the players. What they initially see is him, plate armor, mace in one hand, chain in his other hand, and that chain runs back to the neck of the acolyte that he had assigned to them. This player, or this character who had been healing and tending to their wounds, well, had them all roll will saves. About half the group, the image slowly faded, and what they saw as the illusion melted away was the succubus in place of the acolyte, her hand holding a wand, resting against the high priest for this place. And the other half, they still saw the original illusion, and right there they realized that this NPC had been a plant all along, had been a double agent, keeping an eye on their activities, learning their strengths and weaknesses, and making sure that they had some fairly strong illusions cast on them, in particular the fighter. The fighter and this NPC had ended up starting a rather physical relationship. Now, normally, succubi in Dungeons and Dragons rules have the ability to drain life and strength from their targets with their kiss. Essentially, the character will lose character levels. But that going back to how I said house ruling is something that should be done and encouraged just to make the game a little bit more flavorful, a little bit more cool, and make it sort of fit, instead of draining character levels from the fighter, something that might have been noticed, she just wove stronger enchantments on him. It was going to be, especially since fighters have low will save scores, was going to have an incredibly difficult time overcoming this illusion. So, when the fight started, not only is there this cleric that was a higher level than the party being healed by the succubus, who was also throwing out a bunch of spells to disrupt and confuse them all, but all she had to do was use a free action to say to the fighter, "Why are you letting your friends harm me? Can't stop them." And he would get in the way, or be compelled to get in the way, and at least grapple them and try to keep them from causing harm to the succubus who was using her wand to heal the players. And at this point, this is when everything started to click for them. The cleric never healed them channeling magic. She always used a wand. This also explained why NPCs, like the ones who were guarding the cave, the entrance to the cave, ended up killing each other. She had thrown charm spells down on them. And so the way all the little pieces came together and started to click, it was just one of the coolest moments for me as a DM. It just went so perfectly. One of those rare moments where the whole plan went perfectly. And because these were two separate cults and the players were dealing with double agents throughout this whole thing, the course of this adventure, the tone it had taken, it engendered quite a bit of paranoia in the players, to the point that it'd be very rare that they'd actually fully trust an NPC, and when they did, they'd try to go to great lengths to make sure that NPC was safe because, well, with demons and devils and the cults that they have in place and the influence that they wield, especially devils in particular. Just for those of you who may be new to this, demons are like white hot bundles of rage. They just come straight at you. There's not going to be as much subtlety. There can be, but just given Demon's inherently chaotic nature in the scope of this game, they have trouble keeping themselves in check and focused on the larger strategy overall. They can do it, but even the smartest amongst them just relishes every opportunity they get to just wade knee deep in blood and gore and just inflict damage. Whereas devils, they certainly delight in suffering, but they're logical about it. They go step by step by step. There's an inherent rigid hierarchy, and they will keep to that and they will keep to the plan as much as possible. Now, devils within their own hierarchy and structure will certainly compete against one another and have their own machinations to try to elevate themselves and achieve greater and greater status and glories. But there's still a rigid hierarchy there. There's still a certain decorum to follow, and following logical, intelligent, clever plans, little subtle corruptions is inherently something that they are going to do and stick to. It's just very much a very natural and inherent part of their being, of their essence, their makeup, however you want to split or describe that. So this one little play right there that just went perfectly just set the tone for the rest of the players to be just utterly paranoid throughout the rest of the campaign. And it was perfect because an NPC might come forward offering help, and it may have been genuine help, but the players, their characters, just with such insidious betrayals at hand and not knowing who they can really fully trust, were slow to take that help. And sometimes being slow to take that help would leverage for me as the DM and storyteller, would leverage for me advantages that I could just pry against them. And when they did fully trust somebody and it became known or just relevant over the course of play, that the players would go to pretty great lengths to make sure that their allies stayed safe. Well, these various cults would target their NPC allies to try to draw the players out and isolate them. All sorts of insidious and underhanded tactics can be employed here, and it all again came around to just having a double agent in place. And that's what I'm recommending to you today for making your campaigns better. Whether it's a cloak and dagger campaign, whether it's dealing with these various cults, or a grand war campaign sort of deal, having a double agent in place, finding that right moment to slip them in, like, the players need a cleric and the cleric's not here. Well, cleric's been assigned other duties. Here's an NPC to help you. Don't do this every time, because if every single time they start warming up to trust an NPC you have in the game, they get betrayed, they just kind of start to expect it and it loses its flavor, and it gets to be pretty frustrating when everything they do is just immediately met with defeat. It's the same idea if you keep slapping them down with combat encounters. If everything's a struggle, everything's a fight that they barely win or never win, it's just frustrating. They don't want to play anymore. And also, those moments where the players struggle and they have to play smart to get ahead, it they don't stand out as much if they never have any easy victories or victories that come with just a little bit of expenditure. It's the same idea here with these more subtle NPC placements. When you're placing a double agent that you can use to leverage against your players, do it just carefully, sporadically, and judiciously. Don't do it at every turn. Employ it at the right moment. What the right moment is just going to depend on the context of your game and the course of play that you're going through, but you'll find it. Just kind of keep your eyes open for it. And the betrayal doesn't even have to be right away. It can be just a constant little thing here where the spy is reporting, leaving little reports, little dead drops, sending information back somehow, going, okay, this is what these characters are up to. This is what they've done. These are their strengths and weaknesses. And that can go towards setting up a really difficult ambush for the players. The kind of ambush where maybe, instead of staying and fighting, trying to fight their way out and escaping is the smart way to go. But again, all of this is going to depend on the details of your campaign world, the type of play style that you're going for, and the sort of campaign that you have going. So, just put it all together, find that moment where you can leverage this most favored tactic of mine, and just have at it, have fun with it. I have been Jordan, your host, Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe and go through and check out some of the other content I've thrown up here on the channel. And also make sure you click that bell icon so that way you get notified when I start posting up more content here. Thank you all for your time. You guys have yourselves a good night.